Hello, everyone. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Justin Brooks, who is director and co-founder of the California Innocence Project, an organization that is actively making an impact on the lives of so many. So, Justin, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
It's my pleasure.
So,
Thanks
let's,
for having me.
yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Let's get started with a little brief summary about who you are and what your organization does as well. So, can you tell me about the work that you guys are doing right now?
Sure. So I'm the director of the California Innocence Project. We're a law school clinic at California Western School of Law in San Diego, where I'm a law professor. And the California Innocence Project is a law school clinic where my students investigate cases of wrongful conviction, and then we litigate to get innocent people out of prison. So we have the missions of freeing innocent people, but at the same time training the students to be excellent lawyers in that process.
That sounds great. So not only are you helping individuals who are not getting the justice they need, but you're also helping students as well attain different resources for the future, definitely.
Yeah, that's I always say that walking innocent people out of prison is the heart of the work. And, bringing people home to their families who have been in prison for years for crimes they didn't commit is the most inspiring part of the work. But in terms of the long-term impact, we've freed 35 innocent people from prison in my project, but I've trained hundreds of law students, and they're going to go on to be lawyers and judges. Some of them will be prosecutors. And that's the way to, in the long term, improve the criminal justice system. We also do a lot of policy work in our office, and we actually have changed a number of laws in California to improve the system.
And what pushed you to start this organization or to co-found it and ultimately direct it as well?
So 26 years ago, I heard about a young woman on death row in Illinois, and I discovered that her lawyer had actually pled her guilty and she got the death penalty on a plea bargain.
Wow.
So I took her case on and I met with her on death row, and she told me she was innocent. So at the time I was teaching law school in Michigan, I went to my first year criminal law students and said, there's this very young person. When she was convicted, she was 21 years old. This very young woman on death row. And she says she's innocent. Who wants to help me out investigate the case? And that night in my kitchen, the Innocence Project was born for me, where we sat around, went through the paperwork, investigated the crime scene, and we ultimately discovered that she was in fact innocent. And she was one of a number of people who ultimately were released, who were sentenced to death in Illinois. And it's the case kind of shocked me that a young person like her could get chewed up by the system so easily. And I also loved working on the case with students and realized the value in that. So that inspired me to move to California in 1999 and start the California Innocence Project.
Yeah, so you've been doing this for a very long time, especially with the organization. Have you seen it grown or change over time?
If you stick around long enough, you can start to see history in your own lifetime. And that's certainly true in the work that I do. When I started doing this work, there were only a handful of people in the world who were involved in, freeing innocent people from prison. It was just in the beginning of DNA, and we were just starting to see what we could do with DNA. So when I started the California Innocence Project, there were about 5 organizations in the United States doing this work. Now there's more than 60 in the United States. We have projects in Europe, we have projects in Asia, we have projects in Australia and New Zealand, and I oversee 25 innocence organizations in Latin America that I helped start, from Chile all the way up to the Mexican border. So it's been a global movement because there's innocent people in prison in every country in the world. And I've seen it really grow and flourish in the past couple of decades.
Yeah, of course. And do you notice any difference, particularly since you're doing it in so many different locations and countries? Do you notice any difference as you're doing it in these different locations?
There's tremendous differences. I always say that we have a project in Holland. And if we need a project in Holland, we need a project everywhere, because the Northern European systems are far superior to the United States system and all the other systems in the world. They're very particular. They put great resources into their cases. They don't have anywhere near the scale of cases to deal with like the United States. And so more attention is paid to details. The United States has the largest prison system in the world. We have the biggest criminal justice system in the world. We make a lot of mistakes because it's not handmade anymore. It's like a factory in a lot of ways. People get processed through the system. Most people plead guilty, don't get trials. More than 90% of the cases are pled out. So I think the problems we have in the United States have to do with us just having too many people in the system, having sentences that are way too long. And obviously what's been highlighted this year in particular, we still have a lot of racism in our system and a lot of issues with poverty and people not getting equal justice. But I also work in Latin America. I spend about a third of my time in Latin America, and Mexico, for example, is just starting to do trials for the first time in 400 years. So I've been training lawyers down there for a number of years on how to do trials. And I worked in Chile right after Pinochet, so a long time ago, and I helped train the first 12 public defenders in Chile. So I've seen transformations in some of these systems. Chile now has one of the best criminal justice systems in Latin America, from having the worst and having death camps in the 80s. And I'm seeing improvements in Mexico, although they suffer from corruption and being just a giant system. To put in context, the United States has 200 law schools. Mexico has more than 2,000 law schools.
Wow.
And so training and getting people into a new system is a big task. In fact, today after this call, I'm going to be on with a competition that I run in Mexico that I'm doing online right now, where I train law students how to do trials by having moot court competitions and having them compete against each other in the different universities. So I'm really lucky that I get to work around the world. I was out in Japan when we opened our project there. I spend a lot of time in the UK helping with the projects there. And it's fascinating to see all these different systems. But one fundamental thing is true: they all make mistakes. They all have innocent people in prison. So, we can think we have the best system and all that, but the bottom line is there's cracks in every system. The question is just how big are the cracks, and how can we close them a little bit? We'll never be able to close them the entire way.
Yeah, definitely. So it definitely sounds like you have a lot that you're doing, not only here in the US, but throughout the world as well. And you mentioned a little bit on what's going on today and the racism that's kind of not resurfaced, but kind of we're seeing more and more of it in our systems as well today. So, what are the missions or the goals that you have set for this year specifically?
Well, this year my mission is very similar to what's been in past years: get innocent people out of prison, train law students, work on policy, and educate the general public about the problems in the criminal justice system. This year has tremendous opportunities, though, that I've not seen in my career. I mean, to see millions of young white kids out on the street protesting about Black Lives Matter is something we haven't seen in our country. I mean, I don't know if young people truly appreciate how extraordinary it is. I used to represent demonstrators in DC in the beginning of my career, and the only thing you could really get people out in giant numbers was the pro-choice movement, pro-choice, pro-life protests. Then you'd see thousands of people on the streets because people felt like, it individually impacted them. When it's something like a foreign war or something more abstract that people don't see impacting their own lives, it's hard to get them motivated. But what we've seen in this country is young white kids who are not the subject of these shootings and this violence standing up and talking about it and protesting about it. So I think this is a critical time in our criminal justice system. I think these trials that are going on with police officer shootings are critical in how they're addressed. We just yesterday had the second state in the United States to take away immunity from police officers for violence. Most people didn't realize that police officers have immunity, and so do prosecutors, and so do judges. So it's very hard to sue them and change the system. So I'm really excited that it's a great time for people like me who've been talking about criminal justice issues for decades to start having some more ears like you and your viewers to be tuning in on these topics. And that's how change is going to come. That's how we're going to get better jurors, because they're going to understand these issues. And I have a lot of confidence and faith in this next generation coming up.
Yeah, for sure. I think that we've seen a lot of change, especially in a short amount of time recently. And I think that definitely also has been influenced by how quickly we're able to access information now, whether it be um, through regular media or online media as well has grown exponentially. So I definitely agree that there's more hope to have, I guess you would say, in the future for this next generation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Social media, there's a lot of bad things about it, but one great thing about it is you can get information out. You can gather people together. I first noticed that with my own children, that they were suddenly able to put these very quick parties together in high school, where when I was a kid, you'd have to find everybody at home and get them on the telephone, and it wasn't that easy to create an instant party where kids can now all just text each other and within a half hour can have a party going. Well, the same thing is true with protests and organizing. There's tools now that are available that weren't before, and we're seeing that around the world as protest movements are taking off. That organization is something that can be done a lot more effectively now than any generation in history.
Yeah, of course. Switching topics a little bit, I managed to get to you a link to the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, which are the 17 goals the UN set in place to achieve a world of prosperity in the future, and they range from no poverty to strong institutions, as well as peace and justice. So, how would you say your organization relates to these sustainable development goals that the UN currently has?
Sure. Well, obviously, justice is our main goal. Getting justice for our clients, creating a more just system for people who are in it. But I think it goes further than that, and I think typically people don't understand how critical it is to have, for instance, a stable justice system in order to have a stable society. And working in Latin America has truly taught me that. Where people don't have confidence in the court systems, it really impacts a country economically, in powerful ways. You're not going to buy a house in a country where you're not confident that someone couldn't take your house away. You're not going to want to open a factory in a country where you don't feel the courts are going to enforce contracts. And what we've had the benefit of in the United States for a long time is that the rule of law here is a lot stronger than in other countries. So people can have confidence in investing in the country, and they can feel more confident about the criminal justice system being one that's mostly protecting people. But as that stuff starts to slip away, and people lose confidence in the justice system and lose confidence in the court system, you start to see the whole society fall apart. And you really do not have to look far to see that in other countries, the powerful impact of not having good, strong institutions. So I think part of our work, some people see our work as calling out the flaws, and that not being good for the criminal justice system because I'm the one screaming every day about all the mistakes. But until you scream about the mistakes, you don't fix them and you don't make the system stronger. And the stronger systems recognize their flaws and remedy them. And we're starting to see a lot of that happening now in the United States. For example, prosecutors' offices now have their own conviction review units, where due to the work of the innocence organizations of calling them out on their cases over the last couple of decades, they now realize it's a good idea to get ahead of that story and start reviewing their own cases. And that strengthens the system, it strengthens confidence in the system, it makes the prosecutors better offices, the court stronger. So I think our mission is right along the lines of the United Nations missions to strengthen institutions, and the pursuit of justice is a big part of that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap as well as you mentioned. Um, Ultimately, that affect other goals as well. What are some resources that you would provide to people who want to be more informed, not only about your organization, but along criminal justice reform in general?
Sure. Well, they could go to CaliforniaInnocenceProject.org, which is my website. They could, of course, follow me and my rants every day about criminal justice on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I'm at Justin O. Brooks, Justino Brooks. But there's a tremendous amount of resources out there about the criminal justice system and the issues of it. I'm actually writing a book right now about cases I've worked on over the past 30 years to illustrate all the problems that we're trying to fix, like problems with the way ID procedures are done, problems in the way that we obtain confessions, problems the way that homicides are investigated, and how there's tunnel vision often with police officers. So, what I say often is it's all of our collective criminal justice system, right? I mean, we count on it every day that it's going to protect us, it's going to protect our families, and it acts on our behalf. So when the state executes someone, they are executing that person on behalf of us. And so we all need to play an active role in it and speak out against the injustices in order to shape a criminal justice system that we're proud of and that reflects our values. So, you can stick your head in the sand and just ignore it, and we even intentionally build prisons out in the middle of nowhere so nobody ever sees what's going on in them. But it's important that people become informed because it is operating on everyone's behalf, for good or for bad.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely affects everyone, whether it be directly or indirectly. How can others get involved with the organization? I know you mentioned your website and your social media as well, but is there any work that people can do directly with the organization?
Sure. So there's innocence organizations, as I said, around the country and around the world. You can find one closest to you by going to a website called innocencenetwork.org. And then if you go on those websites, there's tabs for volunteer work. For instance, we use volunteers in our office to open the mail that we get from the prisons every single day. People help with events that we're doing. They help with fundraising. And of course, we have to raise money to get these organizations to work. So that's certainly helpful. But it's good to go to the websites of the different organizations and just see what they have to offer and get involved.
Of course. And in all your years of experience, is there a particular story or case or cases that stand out in your mind when you think of the various ones that you've handled?
Well, it always for me comes back to Marilyn Malero, my first client. She's what inspired me to get into this work. The sad part of her story is, even though I was able to get her death sentence reversed, I couldn't get the court to withdraw her guilty plea. And I continued to litigate her case for 25 more years. So I started that case when I was 29 years old, and I finally got her out of prison last year, and I'm 55.
Wow.
I spent 25 years litigating her case, and just during COVID, finally got her out. So that's a case that's been on my mind for a quarter of a century as I've worked on it. And it was tough, because I know she saw all these other people that I was walking out of prison, and it was never her. So yeah, I've got I love all my clients. Each case is its own story. Each case is its own tragedy and triumph in the end. But that's the case that stuck with me the most.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine how it feels to when you do accomplish getting someone out as well, or sometimes when you don't accomplish that, and you have to wait for such a long time. The patience that you must have is incredible. Um,
Some days. I always tell my students, if you want a life like this, the sort of flat life where you go to work every day at 9 o'clock and you know exactly how your day is going to unfold, and 5 o'clock you go home and you watch TV or hang out with your family, this isn't the life for you, because this life is like this. It's up and down and up and down. And we have these extraordinary days where we bring people home, and we have very difficult days where we know someone's innocent and we just can't get the court to go our way. We have a lot of tough days.
Yeah, definitely never knowing what to expect sometimes.
Mhm.
And is there any cases currently that we should know about or that you can tell us about?
Well, we're working on lots of cases. The cases are all actually on our website, CaliforniaInnocenceProject.org. They can look at. There's one case right now that I'm hoping to resolve very shortly. This woman named Kimberly Long. We've been litigating her case for many years. We got her conviction reversed. The prosecutor's office appealed the reversal. We fought the reversal of the reversal through the appellate courts all the way up to the California Supreme Court. They ultimately found that her conviction should be reversed. But now we're in this kind of limbo of where the prosecution can go ahead and re-prosecute her, even though this case has been going on forever. So I'm hoping in the next week or so to hear that the district attorney is dropping the charges in that case. But until we hear those magic words, these cases keep you up at night. That's one of
Yeah.
them. There's a
And how long
great
did you say it
podcast.
was?
Sorry, say that again.
How long did you say it's been going on?
20 years. Her
Wow.
case has been going on and off. She spent 7 years in prison. She was tried multiple times. She's been out for several years while we've been doing her appeals. But this has been hanging over her head every day of, I might go back to prison. In fact, in some ways, it's crueler being out and then being sent back in than being sent there in the first place, because she knows what could happen to her. So there's a great podcast you can check out. Her name's Kimberly Long, and a CBS News reporter did a 5-part podcast on her story, and it's very, very compelling. Some of these cases, it's hard to believe they can go on for as long as they do when we have such strong cases for innocence.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to check out that podcast as well. And there's various ways that you mentioned for people to get involved, and I think sometimes one of the ways people can also get involved is just having those conversations with people on criminal justice reform, and also having the conversations just on racism in general. I know we talked about that a little bit earlier, and sometimes people can feel like these conversations are uncomfortable, especially with people they are close to. So what would you say are the best ways for people to confront not only injustices but have these potentially uncomfortable conversations?
I think you've got to, you got to take the judgment out of it, and you have to do some listening. We've become such a bifurcated country. Everything is black and white. I'll give you an example. One of my clients, Brian Banks, it's my most famous case. There was a movie made out of it. Morgan Freeman is in it. It's on Hulu right now. And the reason it became famous was because Brian played in the NFL after he was exonerated. And the case involved when he was in high school and one of the best football players in the country, a girl in his school accused him of rape. And then years later, she came forward and admitted it never happened. And Brian got exonerated. And there's so much stuff on social media about that case of people taking one side or the other in really absurd ways. Some people saying, believe all women in every case, and other people saying, don't believe any women. They're all lying about these things. And there has to be middle ground. And really what the middle ground is, investigate every rape case. Rape is a very unreported crime. There are more than probably any other crime, women get raped and it never gets prosecuted. So we have to acknowledge that. But the other side, we've got to acknowledge, but yeah, it's very rare, but there is an occasion when a false claim is made, and we've got to investigate those too. But it's so hard to have those conversations, and people try to draw me into them on social media and get me involved in the argument to say, oh, there's millions of women out there lying about rape convictions. And there's not. That's just a total falsehood. But this particular case deserved attention, and this guy didn't deserve to be in prison. We're the same way about guns. We're the same way about so many. It's either guns are terrible or guns are awesome. There's no middle ground. So I think the first thing is we've got to recognize positions. We've got to listen. We've got to respect people's experiences. We've got to recognize that everybody has inherent biases, whoever you are. Every minute you're on this planet, you're developing bias. and then maybe we can have these conversations. But I got to tell you, it's not been easy. It's not been easy lately. I get in conversations and these things on social media, and people just are not listening. They're just positioning and throwing out stuff they picked up from, whatever biased news source they listen to. And
Yeah,
so
so
it's hard.
I guess that would be one of the possible negatives we mentioned earlier about social media. It's kind of you can pick up information. Sometimes it's great and it's fantastic, and you can really mobilize people. But sometimes you can definitely run into information that's inaccurate, and it's only causing further damage to the issue.
Absolutely. The amount of false information, we created this amazing tool that has all the information in the history of the world, and then we polluted it with a whole bunch of false information. That's what, and since, I've been on the internet since its inception, that's what I've seen happen. It started as this like scientific tool, and then communication among universities and scholars sharing information. And then we started putting in encyclopedic information of history. And then Mark Zuckerberg created Facebook, and and Twitter came along, and Instagram, and the next thing you know, people just started feeding it with false information, and then people cling to that if it conforms with their own biased point of views, because that's human nature. And
Well,
so
hopefully we're able to in the future, as we said, that we have hope in the next generation. Hopefully there's a way for us to clean up a little bit more on social media and have better messages put out there.
I do think that's true, because I think the next generation, your generation, are more skeptical about information that you come across, because you've grown up in this world of false information. I don't seem to be having these arguments with 20-some-year-olds. I seem to be having them with more 60-some-year-olds that have clung to something that they read that's completely false. So I think, yeah, your generation has a healthy dose of skepticism. That is a good thing.
Yeah, and hopefully, following this hope that we can clean up a little bit social media, what is a message that you would have for my generation, for younger individuals who want to participate, not only with your organization, but just generally, they want to do more activism, they want to make a difference, they're seeing what's going on now, and they want to get more involved. What would be your message for them?
Yeah, I work with college students all the time. I talk to them every single day. And I always give them this message that you've worked really hard. You got to a point in your life where a lot of them have paid a huge amount of money for their education. They've got loans. They've put a lot of time and energy and effort. And my message to them is always, don't settle. Right? Don't settle on something you're not excited about. Don't settle on a career you're not excited about. Find something you're passionate about and pursue it. And you'll be able to figure out the job side of it and how to get along financially along the way. I'm 55 years old. I have a lot of friends I went to law school with that I talk to now that have had very, you know, dissatisfied careers, where they went to jobs that paid well, but it didn't ultimately give them the satisfaction they wanted in their lives. And I've been very fortunate that I was able to follow my passion and make a living at it. And it is possible to do that. So sure, you could find something you're passionate about and volunteer, and there's plenty of opportunities to do that. But even better is going to work every day and it being your passion and it being what you care about, because then it never feels like you're at work. It
Yeah.
feels like you're just following your passion, and it's there. It's out there for everybody if they want it.
Yeah, of course. Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anywhere, where can people find you, whether it be the organization, or where can people reach you as well?
Yeah, so again, CaliforniaInnocenceProject.org is our website. They can find me on Twitter at Justin O. Brooks, Justino Brooks. They can find me on Instagram at Justin O. Brooks, Justino Brooks, or Justin Brooks on Facebook.
Perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much, Justin, for joining us, and thank you for the work you're doing as well. It's amazing that you're not only impacting the lives of those in the system, but also the students who are trying to make a difference in their field of work as well. So thank you so much for the work you're doing, and thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.